Welcome back. This is John Mazzara again, and we're going to talk today on section 4 about some of the holding period considerations and just um, considerations and things that you might want to do in making an analysis of a property. So let me start with how to look at a property, or how I look at a property. A lot of times, uh, people just consider the cash flow, and that's fine. Meaning, what is my cash on cash return? So if I put 20% down and I receive a certain amount of cash flow, what is the return on my 20% and or the closing costs that I had to incur, or my improvements closing costs? What is the return on my initial investment, depending on what that initial investment means to you? Some people may have a hurdle rate, meaning if when I do my analysis that I don't get over a X% rate of return, 3%, 5%, 10%, whatever your hurdle rate would be. If I can't get that from this property, then I don't want to buy it. That is one way to make a decision, yes or no. But real estate is a unique animal in the sense that it not only produces cash flow, or it can produce cash flow, not all properties cash flow, but it can produce cash flow based on the rent that you receive. But it also has other ways that you can profit from it. One of the ways is appreciation. So let's say the property was just a break even, but was appreciating nicely. You're getting leverage then off of the appreciation of the whole building, not just your down payment. So unlike other investments that you buy, you get, let's say you buy a stock, for example, the value of that stock has to go up in aggregate, but because of the leverage factor with real estate, you could put 20% down on a $200,000 building, and that'd be 40 grand. If the building went up 10%, that's on 200,000, that's $20,000. So 20,000 over your 40 investment, that's like a 50% rate of return. So appreciation is another metric that I would consider. And of course, we don't know because it's always retrospective when we look back to see how much a building appreciated. But if we believe that we're going to have appreciation going forward, that should be something that you consider in your analysis. Because if you're just looking on a cash on cash metric or return, you might miss a big opportunity. So you have appreciation, you have cash flow. You also have something called depreciation, where the government allows you to, on a schedule, look at the building's value, not the land, and depreciate it over a period of years, 27 and a half for residential property. And you can use that loss to offset gain from that building and or up to $3,000, I believe, of ordinary income. Now, I am not an accountant. Tax laws change every day and under every administration. So I'm going to say don't rely on me for any tax law. Instead, talk to your accountant or your attorney or both. But don't look to me for your tax because I'm not an accountant. So I can just tell you in generality what some of the rules are and how they would be applicable to you. Of course, will be dependent on your own individual situation. But depreciation is one of the benefits that you may be able to take advantage of when you own a piece of rental property. So you would factor that into your equation. And then you've got principal pay down. So assuming that you have a mortgage, there's going to be amortization schedule associated with that mortgage. And what happens is that when you pay your principal and interest portion of your payment, the principal is reduced, albeit small in the beginning of the mortgage and larger as it goes forward, but you're reducing that mortgage down. So you have principal reduction. So even if a property broke even in the form of cash in versus cash out, you're going to have somebody else paying off your mortgage and creating equity for you that way. So you've got principal reduction, you've got depreciation that may or may not be applicable to your situation. You've got appreciation, which may be there, may not be there, and then you have cash flow. So real estate is unique in that you can benefit from it in all of those ways. So it's how a lot of wealth is created. So I would consider it and consider all of those other variables when you look at a property, because when you add them all up, you may find that a single digit return may actually return you a double digit return. No guarantees, but take a look at it. Another thing, a way to analyze a property is something called an APOD. An APOD, you can Google that form, and it's called the Annual Property Operating Data. And what you do is you plug in your numbers. It's basically a little spreadsheet where you plug in the costs and you make some assumptions with regards to vacancies. But that's how you can do an analysis of your property. I do napkin math all the time, and I have an easy form that if we work together that I'd be happy to share, as well as I have some computer programs that I can utilize to help you, make some guesstimates. Everything, of course, is a guesstimate until it happens, and then it's an actual number. So we do pro formas. You could do a pro forma. I think I can get this for rent, and I think I'll always have it rented, so on and so forth. And then based on that assumption, this is what the building will return. So that's what an APOD is. It's good for a pro forma. Now, when you own a property, you will probably set up with your accountant a Schedule E, and that's your profit and loss schedule for your building. And if you're buying a rental property from another landlord, one thing that you may want to do is trust but verify. So if that other landlord told you that the building cash flowed $200 a month, you could say, well, that sounds pretty good. Would you mind providing me a copy of your Schedule E from your tax return, which is the tax return page that reports the profit and the loss for that specific building? You didn't ask him for the W-2. You didn't ask him for his 1099 or the front page of the 1040. You asked him for one schedule that would validate that $200 cash flow. Should be no problem in providing that to you, unless that number was not accurate. So if somebody, in my opinion, won't show you their Schedule E, because that's the number they have to provide to the IRS, so it's going to be accurate, right? Unless they're cheating on their tax returns. So unless they will provide that to me, then I'm going to take everything they say with a grain of salt, and I might be wary of the whole deal. And if you look at the Schedule E and all of a sudden you see, wait a minute, you said it was $200 a month positive cash flow, but it actually is losing money. What's going on here? Then you may go, oh, you know what? Last year was kind of weird because I had to put in new carpeting, or it was vacant because of this, or I wasn't getting paid because of that, whatever the situation. Then you could say, well, okay, then could I see the other 2 years Schedule E, since you owned it for a number of years? It was cash flowing $200 a year those years, right? And they should be able to provide that to you. Again, oh, well, I can't do that, or oh, those numbers. So now you're starting to see a trend that maybe this number is misrepresented. Now, that's if you're buying from an investor. If you're buying from an owner-occupant, which is really probably who you will be initially buying it from, meaning when you go out and you buy a condo or townhouse, if that's what you choose to do, or even a single-family home, the seller of that property will not be more than likely another investor. It'll be somebody that was using it for their own use as a primary residence, and you're going to be turning it into something different. You're going to be turning it into a rental property. So that first time, there is no numbers, so you're going to have to make a hypothetical pro forma for yourself, and that'll help you make that decision of whether or not to go forward. Does it meet your hurdle or not? Some of the things that you should factor in to your pro forma would be vacancy factors and a cost possibly associated with your time as a manager. So you may say, well, my property is never going to be vacant. Well, I don't know if that's realistic. Even if it's a great property, the fact that somebody has to move in and somebody has to move out, unless they occur almost simultaneously, there's going to be a little vacancy. Might be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, especially if you need to come back in there, rekey, recarpet, or clean the carpet, or repaint, whatever you need to do. So you might need a little time in that property. So I think factoring in a vacancy factor of 5% would be more conservative. Maybe on a property where you expect higher turnover, you would do something greater than that. Maybe it would be 10%. It's what you think it is. But I would definitely factor something in. And then again, the value associated with your time. So you may say, well, okay, let's see if I'm gonna have to rent it. It'll be rented for a year. I'm going to have to go over there probably a couple of Sundays and then meet with the tenant, and I'm going to have 10 hours into it. So, factor in something for that, because if you don't want to do that, then you're going to have to hire somebody to do that. So maybe, for example, you would say, well, I can do it now, but you know what? My job may take me to another state. I don't want to sell the property. So at that time, then I would have to hire a manager. And, here's what the current rates are of hiring a manager, and therefore, this is what it would cost me. So you have to factor that into your number. So that's just my recommendation. You don't have to do either of those two. You could go say it's never going to be vacant, and you could say, well, my time is not going to be factored in either, but I think I would. The other thing you have to think about, again, these are all pro formas. So what is the appreciation rate? Well, if we look back, it's been great, either high single digit or even double digits in some years since the recession, as the property values have caught up. And the lower interest rate environment that we're in today has allowed the properties to appreciate more, because people can borrow money cheaper and pay more for that same house and have the same payment because the interest rate's less. Is that going to go on forever? I don't think so. Like I say, I've been doing this 35 years, and we go up, we plateau. Sometimes we go down a little bit, and then we go up, we plateau, we go down a little bit. That's more of a normal market. It was anomalous that we had that strange time of the recession when it went down by like 50% in 3 years. I don't see in my crystal ball the catalysts in the environment that would bring that upon us anytime soon. I guess it could. Anything's possible, but my crystal ball says no. My magic 8 ball says no. Anyway, that's what I would say on that. But factor something in for appreciation if you want. Your accountant can discuss with you whether or not you are eligible to set up a Schedule E and take advantage of the depreciation that might be associated. Factor that in if you want. Before you buy in any city, make sure you Google and call the city to understand the licensing requirements. Minneapolis and St. Paul are different than all of the other surrounding communities. Minneapolis, for example, at the time of taping of this, was charging you $1,000 to turn a property into a rental property for the first time that you obtained your license. They would give you a credit if you took an online rental class, similar to this, but different. But anyway, they would give you a credit. I think it was $250. But that's a fee that the other cities aren't charging. So just be prepared. And then the rental rules on how you have to act as a landlord and what you can and can't do in your criteria of tenant selection in Minneapolis is completely different than the rest of the state. So make sure that you understand that as well before you do any investing. So I want you to go into any investment with your eyes wide open, understand exactly what the rules are, and make sure that you can abide by them so that you are happy. Again, I want you to have success so that we have a long-term relationship if we decide to work together, and that I can help you find and acquire multiple properties. So doing it right and having a great experience is what I want for you. Another thing to think about with regards to a property is that properties that are used as rentals have something called non-homestead taxes associated with them up to a certain price point. The differential from homestead to non-homestead tax today is very little. In the past, it was extreme, but the landlord lobbyists, if you will, got together and tried to get some equity in taxation so that the landlords weren't overburdened in bearing their unfair share of the taxes. So they did succeed in that, and they have succeeded in that for the time being. And I hope that that is maintained. Otherwise, if they want more affordable housing and they penalize you for it by taking away your cash flow, you'll seek alternative investments. So if they want more affordable housing, they have to make the venture of landlording attractive and profitable. And so I hope the cities continue to see it that way versus trying to extract more cash flow from you by raising the taxes on you for being a landlord. But that is something called non-homestead taxes. I want to make you aware of it. You can call the city and find out, when I turn this property into a rental, what will be my taxes? What will be the tax difference? And they may say, well, on that $200,000 property, it went up 200 bucks. Okay, then you factor that 200 bucks into your equation because that's the actual taxes that you're going to have going forward. Also, I want you to be aware that you need to, in most cities today, they're moving towards a rental licensing requirement that typically in most other cities other than Minneapolis is a couple $100. Typically involves a safety check. You pay somebody, from the city to come over, they look and they make sure you have your smoke detectors, your carbon monoxide detectors, your fire extinguishers, any other safety items that they deem necessary. Not a bad thing at all. You're going to run a good business anyway. You're going to have safe building, and you're going to want that from a protection standpoint. You're going to want all of the safety features in that property. So I'm not opposed personally to that. I think I'm more, I like the fact that there's a baseline minimum of safety checks that are going on so properties aren't falling into disrepair. So I think that's a good thing, but I just wanted to make you aware that that does exist out there. Now, with regards to depreciation, your accountant may just depreciate the building portion of your investment. They may do the appliances separately. They're going to tell you probably that improvements, and repairs are different. Improvements need to be added back to your basis, whereas repairs can be expensed. So if you put on a new roof, you may have to add that back to your basis and depreciate it versus expensing the roof in the year that you put it on. That's between you and the accountant on what you decide is an expense and what is an improvement. And again, these rules change. So make sure you know what the rules are so that you do it correctly. And that's why you should always seek. I have an accountant, a CPA that's fabulous. I wouldn't do this on my own, even though I know the rules. I wouldn't touch it. I use attorneys. I think they're great. That's what they're there for. Everybody has their areas of expertise. So don't think you can do it all on your own and do it necessarily the best way. At least initially involve some of these other professionals so that you can get the right advice. And again, I am neither an accountant nor an attorney, so I'm not going to give you legal advice on either of those areas. Okay. One other thing, when you sell a building, you'll have some recapture of that depreciation if you took that depreciation. So again, that's an accounting question, how that will impact your gain, but ultimately down the road, you'll have a little larger gain associated with having taken depreciation initially over the course of your ownership. But you pay that dollar back from that form of taxation in the future. So you get the present value of it today and you pay the tax on it at a lower, albeit lower rate, if the capital gains rates remain lower than the income tax rates. Now that may go away too. That's up in the air all the time. Is it going to be there? Is it not going to be there? Capital gains, the way it is today anyway, are where you hold the building for over a year, and then when you sell it, you pay less typically than your ordinary income tax rate. If they do away with that and make it taxed at ordinary income, then it'll be taxed at your tax bracket. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But let's say you own some rental property, and let's say you bought right, and now it has had significant appreciation. And so the return on your equity is actually less. As you have more equity in the building, you're not taking advantage of the leverage, and you're tying up a lot of capital that if it was re-leveraged could provide you possibly a greater rate of return. So what people will do sometimes with highly appreciated real estate where they don't want to pay the tax is that they'll do what's called a 1031 exchange. Now 1031 exchange allows you to sell the building, go to the closing, but you don't take a check from that closing. You leave it there to be transferred to a qualified intermediary. There are some fantastic ones that you can find online. There's a local attorney that runs one in the Twin Cities here that I've used, not myself personally, but my clients have used, and I've had very good experience with, and I think he is very knowledgeable. If we work together, I'd be happy to share you, or if you call me, I'm happy to share that information with you, but I just won't put it on the video here. But seek out a 1031 qualified intermediary with a good reputation if you want to do a 1031 exchange. There are many variations of a 1031 exchange. You can do a reverse exchange, a new construction exchange, a exchange into Delaware statutory trust. I won't go into it all completely because there's so many different rabbit holes I could go and I could teach a whole class just on that. But I would say seek it out. It's what a lot of investors will do, as they want to pyramid their properties and not be taxed as they go. So they exchange them as they go. Now, if we do a common Starker exchange where you would sell it and go to a closing but not walk out with a check, goes to the qualified intermediary. The easy rules to remember are 45 and 180. You would have 45 days to identify up to 3 replacement properties, and from the date of closing, you would have 180 days to close on 1 or all 3 of those properties. You typically have to maintain the same level of indebtedness in aggregate. So if you owed 150 on those, what you sold, you need to maintain 150 on what you're buying. You need to use your proceeds, and typically you're buying up or greater. You're typically multiplying by re-leveraging your properties. And there's some other different rules like to that too. I'm giving you the most common and the easy ones, but 1031 exchanging is not complicated. It just is an extra step in the process where you don't take the money from the closing. And instead, by not doing that, you didn't have constructive receipt. And as long as you continue with the next part of that exchange, you will have completed an exchange. But if you go 46 days, you haven't found a property, or if you go 181 days and you haven't closed on those properties, then you have nullified, or hypothetically, again, discuss with your attorneys, but hypothetically, you'll have nullified your exchange ability, and then it will default to a regular sale. So those dates are pretty hard dates. I would consider them set in stone dates unless I was told otherwise. So just know that there are some parameters that the IRS has put in place regarding 1031 exchanges, but very common, very easy to do, and a great way to magnify a lot of appreciation in a property to unlock it and redeploy it. So there are some strategies about maybe owner occupying one of those buildings down the road and converting it into a residence and then avoiding taxation, or, and again, need to talk to other people about that, or if you were to hold these properties that are highly appreciated in your estate, they get a step up in basis when you die. So a lot of times people won't, they'll have a property they've had for 30 years and they won't sell it. And the reason why is they don't want to pay the tax, and they don't want to buy more real estate either. So they'll let the property remain in their estate and they'll die. And then at that time, the value will be stepped up to current fair market value, and nobody will have to pay tax on that appreciation. Again, these are the rules today that could change tomorrow. So anyway, that's what I got for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and you continue down the path of wanting to become a landlord. All right.